Hello, my friends. Today we'll start with the fact that despite ongoing negotiations, Putin continues to say that Russia isn't changing its plans and will keep seizing Ukrainian territory.
Commanders of the military groups, must continue carrying out their tasks in strict accordance with the plan of the special military operation. Thank you all.
Zelensky also commented on the new final version of the US proposal. Besides the issue of Donetsk, the document proposed the withdrawal of Russian forces from the occupied parts of Kharkiv and Sumy regions and from the Dnipro area. Kherson, Zaporizhzhia we hold where we hold. As for the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, the Russians want the plant for themselves and we are against it. So we now have two key unresolved issues: the territory of Donetsk region and the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. The US wants a joint format for managing the plant. For now, it's difficult to say what kind of consortium that might be. Donbass, the Russians want all of it. We don't accept that, and the Americans are looking for some kind of solution. Our position is fair. We stay where we stay, meaning along the contact line. So now it's absolutely clear that Ukraine didn't agree to the US proposal. Although Trump said that his conversation with the Europeans was tough, he wanted them to put the pressure on Ukraine so that Zelensky would sign the deal. In a call with the leaders of the UK, France, and Germany, Trump urged them to pressure Zelensky into accepting the terms of the peace plan, under which Ukraine would have to agree to significant territorial losses and limit the size of its army. He showed no signs that he was willing to reconsider the terms proposed by Washington. As a result, the White House stated that Trump is dissatisfied with both the Ukrainian and Russian sides.
The president is extremely frustrated with both sides of this war, and he's sick of meetings just for the sake of meeting. He doesn't want any more talk. He wants action. He wants this war to come to an end. And the administration has spent more than 30 hours, just in the past couple of weeks, meeting with the Russians and the Ukrainians and the Europeans and speaking with them as well. So we'll see about the meetings this weekend, and stay tuned.
Zelensky also said that he's ready to hold elections in Ukraine, but that would require a ceasefire.
If President Trump is speaking more about elections in Ukraine, I want to say this very openly. We can try to hold elections. Ukraine is not hiding from democracy, but to make elections possible, there must be a security component, and America can help with this the most. If there is a need for elections now, there must be a ceasefire at least during election process and during voting, and this is something that must be discussed. And honestly, we think here in Ukraine that America should speak to the Russian side about this.
But as we understand, Putin will refuse. Anyway, in his view, Ukraine would use this time to regroup and bring more weapons to the front. We've heard this many times before, so the war is unlikely to stop. And Kuleba said that the war will eventually move toward Europe.
Russian aggression, military aggression against a NATO country or a European ally, is only a matter of time. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Try putting yourself in President Putin's shoes. You don't even need to explain why it should be done. The real question is, why not? What consequences would there be? For months, mysterious drones have been flying in the skies of EU countries. And what? Nothing happened. Just news, no consequences. Putin has plenty of missiles, and he doesn't care about human losses. Why not test Europe to prove what he's been saying for 20 years? His message has always been clear. Europe is rotten. Europe is weak. Europe is terrible. Why not prove it on the battlefield? His goal won't be to conquer an EU country. His goal will be to expose the false promises that the EU and NATO give their nations and citizens, promises of safety and prosperity, promises that we will protect each other. 24 years of Brussels debating how to respond to an act of war that would be Putin's victory. Of course, nothing is predetermined. Everything I'm saying will happen only if things continue the way they are now. Things can change, but look at what Belgium's Prime Minister is doing. Look at the challenges the German army is facing. Look at how many EU countries struggle to restore military service. Some nations in the EU are more prepared than others, but some are not prepared at all. And an alliance is an alliance. Unity is what matters. Putin will challenge not the number of square kilometers, but the very concept of unity.
Friends, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And now let's move to the front line, and here the news is bad. We'll start right away with the Siversk direction because the Russians are actively discussing the full capture of the city of Siversk. And this is a very important city that has held the entire front line in this area. And here is what analysts are saying about it. Yesterday and today, the Russians published numerous videos showing their wrecks all over the city. More than 10 locations have been recorded. As of now, the Russians have captured the majority of Siversk and will likely take full control of it soon, although the city is not yet completely under Russian control. There is also increasing activity from small Russian groups southwest of the city. It's also important to note that the battles for Siversk and the area around it have been ongoing for nearly 3 years. And this is crucial because this territory has been heavily fortified over these years. When the front line stays in one place for a long time, it grows layers of defensive lines, fortifications, and so on. So the fact that the Russians were able to break through this defense is very bad. The advance may now unfold differently and faster. And even Putin officially claimed the capture of Siversk.
We met on November 20th at one of the command posts of the West Group. And back then you told me that Siversk would be in our hands, and that it would happen no later than December 15th. So now I want to repeat your own words back to you and to all your commanders and fighters. You said it. And you did it, man.
Now, let's move to the Kramatorsk direction. Here, attacks on the village of Minkiv, Kramatorsk, and the distance from the current front line to the city is now roughly 14 kilometers. Only today, many people started to realize that serious problems may soon begin here as well, since the intensity of offensive actions in this area is increasing. In the Konstantinivka direction, the Russians are storming Pretechene, the outskirts of Konstantinivka, Pleshiyivka, and Ilyinka, and they are pushing forward in the area of Rusin Yar. But so far, there have been no changes over the past 24 hours. The fighting continues. In the Dobropillia direction, the Russians have sharply increased the activity. They are storming Suvorove, Nekanorivka, Іванівка, Новий Донбас, Нове Шахове, Кучерів Яр, Шахове, and Sofiyivka from two sides. However, the Ukrainian forces are still holding the defense, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians continue to assault Rodinske, Marnograd, and Grishine, and they are pushing through along the western flank. At the same time, the Ukrainian forces are conducting counterattacks here, and yesterday they already published videos showing Ukrainian flags in several parts of Pokrovsk, mostly in the northern and near central areas of the city. So there are Sorry. So there are indeed successes, although it's important to understand that establishing a firm foothold there is difficult because there are already a large number of Russians inside the city. In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians continue the attacks in the town and are pushing through the fields toward Filia. They're also assaulting Ivanivka as before, but there have been no changes for the past 24 hours, and all new attacks have been successfully repelled. In the direction of the settlement of Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Russians are carrying out assaults along the entire line, and the activity is very high. However, they are unable to advance, and the Ukrainian forces are holding the defense here quite well. And despite the fact that the Russians were moving very quickly in this area earlier, the front line has now been stabilized and there are no new changes. In the Huliaipole direction, the Russians are breaking through in the area of Solodka and are assaulting Zelene and Huliaipole. Unfortunately, Ukrainian soldiers are already confirming that the Russians have broken into the town and they are being actively destroyed there. So effectively, the Russians have already established a foothold because they are being eliminated inside houses and basements. So the situation here is worsening, but the fighting is still ongoing. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are assaulting Malatokmachka and are pushing toward Novoandriivka. Fighting is ongoing in Sherbaki, Stepove, Stepnohirsk, and Primorsk. The situation is tense, but the Russians are unable to advance further. In the Kherson direction, the Russians continue attacks near the Antonivsky Bridge, but they have had no success and shelling continues at the usual pace. At the same time, the Russians are posting videos with flags at the front line, but most likely this is the left bank because they still cannot advance to the right bank. Meanwhile, Lavrov claims that Odessa and Mykolaiv are Russian cities and therefore plans to capture them.
The southeast of Ukraine, including Odessa and Mykolaiv, are territories, cities created by the Russians. And the factories, plants, ports, all of this was built by the Russians. Later, these lands were bureaucratically transferred within the Soviet Union to the parts of Ukraine known as Galicia and other Western territories.
Friends, share your thoughts on this in the comments. Now let's move to the Lyman direction. Here the Russians are assaulting Lyman, Dvorichna, Stavki, Drobysheva, Novoselivka, and Alexandrivka. This situation is difficult, but so far they haven't managed to advance further. The Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Borova direction, the Russians are assaulting Novoyegorivka and Chernashina and pushing toward Druzhelubivka. However, over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are assaulting Petropavlivka and pushing toward Kurylivka. However, the front line remains unchanged. The Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks, and clearing operations in Kupiansk are ongoing. In the Dvorichna direction, the Russians are assaulting Kutkivka, but they have had no success and the situation remains unchanged. In the Velykyi Burluk direction, the Russians are assaulting Grigorivka and pushing toward the Dvorichhansk area. It's clear that the Russians have been accumulating reserves for several days and are now trying to advance again. However, the Ukrainian forces are repelling all attacks and there are no changes along the front line. In the Vovchansk area, the situation is reportedly worsening again. The Russians are assaulting the villages of Staritsa, Lyman, Vovchansky Hutory, and the outskirts of Vovchansk. At the same time, the Russians have already claimed full control over the village of Lyman. So it seems that the situation here is gradually deteriorating, but official confirmation is still needed. In the Sumy direction, the Russians have slightly increased the activity. They're trying to break through near Oleksiivka, but haven't succeeded, and the front line remains unchanged. Meanwhile, pro-Russian journalist Tucker stated that Russia is the most advantageous ally for the US.
If you are looking purely through the lens of what's good for the United States, an America first perspective, the most obvious, of course, would be Russia. Russia! Why? Because it's the biggest country in the world. It's the biggest landmass in the world, and it has enormous mineral deposits, energy deposits. It's got a lot of oil and gas and gold and everything else you need to run a society. And it also has a formidable military, by far the biggest on that continent, on the European continent, and huge manufacturing capacities.
So as we can see, the US previously viewed Russia as an enemy, but now considers it as a partner. Okay, and that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.